The dust hadn't even settled when the rancher tossed his last coin onto the wooden table. The barkeep watched, eyes wide. No one in Red Hollow ever saw a man spend his life savings on something he didn't understand. But Daniel Graves wasn't looking for reason, just silence, maybe peace, though neither had followed him since the war. The old trader across from him, a man whose skin looked like sun-baked leather, pushed a small parchment toward him. "You sure?" he rasped. "Ain't no going back once you sign. She'll be yours by right. Apache law." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. "I'm done sleeping alone with ghosts." The trader's grin was half mad. "Then she's yours, cowboy. The chief's daughter. The debt's paid." By dawn, Daniel rode out of town, following the smoke rising from the far ridge where the Apache camp rested. The air smelled of sage and rain that never came. He didn't know what he'd find there, a woman, a curse, or maybe a second chance. When he arrived, the chief stood waiting with 3 men at his side. His eyes were sharp as flint, but there was sadness behind them too. "You come for what you bought," the chief said, voice deep as thunder. "But you must understand, a woman is not a horse. You do not ride her. You stand beside her." Daniel removed his hat, nodding once. "I understand." From the shadows of the tent emerged a figure dressed in white doeskin, embroidered with crimson beads that caught the morning light. She moved slowly, her steps soundless on the sand. When she lifted her face, Daniel felt the breath leave his chest. She was young, maybe 20, with black hair braided with feathers, eyes dark as a storm that never ends. "This is Nyla," said the chief. "She agreed to go with you. But if you break her heart, the desert will break you." Nyla's gaze didn't waver. She studied him, not like a bride, but like someone looking at her fate and weighing it carefully. Then she spoke, her voice low and steady. "You paid for me," she said. "Now do it." Daniel froze, unsure whether to speak or move. "Do what?" She stepped closer, stopping only inches from him. "Do what men do when they take something they think they've earned. But remember, I'm not afraid." Her words struck like a whip. The men behind her said nothing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Daniel turned away, his jaw tightening. "I didn't buy a slave. I bought peace." Nyla's voice softened, but her eyes did not. "Then you came to the wrong place, cowboy. Peace died out here a long time ago." That night they camped near the canyon's edge. The fire burned low, and the stars spread wide and cruel above them. Daniel sat across from her, his hands resting on his knees, the silence between them heavy. Finally he said, "You really want to go through with this?" She looked up. "I already have. You paid. The spirits accepted. Now you carry my shadow until the end." He frowned. "Your shadow?" She nodded. "A wife's promise. A curse if broken." The fire popped. Daniel stared into the flames, wondering what he had truly done. He thought he was buying freedom. Instead it felt like chains, ones made not of iron, but of vows and eyes that could see through him. When he finally lay back under the stars, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, still and silent by the fire, her face carved in light and shadow. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't a deal. It was destiny calling him out by name. The desert morning came slow, golden light spilling over the red cliffs like spilled honey. Daniel woke before the sun rose, his hat over his eyes, boots half buried in dust. The fire was dead, only a few embers breathing smoke. But she was still there, Nyla, sitting by the ashes, with her knees pulled close, humming a tune that sounded older than time itself. He sat up slowly. "You didn't sleep," he said. "I did," she murmured. With my eyes open, Daniel rubbed his face, the line of his jaw tightening. "You talk in riddles, woman." Nyla smiled faintly. "You listen like a man who's afraid of what he might understand." He didn't answer. Instead, he stood and walked toward his horse, checking the saddle, the rope, the canteen. The morning was crisp, quiet, too quiet. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried, and the sound hung over the land like sorrow. They rode most of the day without speaking, only the creak of leather and the rhythm of hooves echoing through the valley. By afternoon, they reached the edge of the river, where the water ran shallow and cold. Daniel stopped, letting the horse drink. Nyla stepped off, kneeling by the water, her reflection trembling beside her. "You carry something heavy," she said softly. "I can feel it in the way you breathe." Daniel stared at the horizon. Everyone carries something, but not everyone hides it so well. He turned to her then, his eyes sharp but tired. "You talk like you know me." "I don't have to," she said. "The desert tells me. It remembers the men who come here to forget themselves." He looked away, his jaw clenching. "Maybe I came here to start again." She dipped her hand into the river, watching the ripples spread. "Then stop calling me what the trader called me. Stop pretending I'm a debt you paid." He hesitated. "Then what should I call you?" She met his gaze, calm and steady. "Call me your equal." For the first time, Daniel didn't have an answer. The words hit something deep inside him, something that had been buried since the war, since the day he'd stopped believing in goodness. He nodded once. "All right, Nyla." She smiled faintly. "Good. Now you begin to see." They made camp again as night fell, beneath the twisted arms of a dead tree. The wind carried whispers through the canyon, the kind that made even the stars seem to listen. Nyla built the fire, while Daniel fixed the saddle straps and checked his rifle. When he sat down, she looked at him. "You said you wanted peace," she said. "But peace is not silence. Peace is truth, and truth," he said, "ain't easy. Then maybe you never wanted peace. Maybe you wanted forgiveness." Daniel's breath caught. For a moment, the world seemed to still, the fire flickered, the shadows deepened, and her eyes glowed with something between pity and understanding. He spoke quietly. "There was a boy out near Wichita. He ran into a fight he shouldn't have. I was the one who pulled the trigger. He couldn't have been more than 16. Nyla didn't flinch. And now you carry him." "I carry the sound," Daniel said. "It never left." She nodded slowly. "Then you'll never find peace until you forgive the man who fired, not the boy who fell." Daniel stared into the flames, his throat tight. "You talk like you've known loss." Nyla's eyes softened. "I've known nothing else." Silence stretched between them, the kind that doesn't break. It breathes. The night was deep, endless. For the first time, Daniel looked at her not as something he'd bought, not as a ghost in a trade, but as a mirror of himself. When the fire died low, she whispered, "Sleep now. Tomorrow we go to the Hill of Ashes. There, the old ones decide what you carry forward, and what burns away." He lay down slowly, the earth hard beneath him, the stars endless above. For the first time in years, he closed his eyes, and the ghosts didn't come. The dawn was pale and cold when they reached the Hill of Ashes. It wasn't a place marked on any map, just a mound of black sand where the wind whispered like the voices of the dead. Daniel stood at the foot of it, staring at the smoke-like haze that drifted above the ground. "This the place?" he asked quietly. Nyla nodded, her face solemn. "This is where men burn what they no longer wish to carry. My father sent me here once. I left behind my fear." Daniel looked at her, then at the endless desert around them. "And what happens if the fire don't take it?" "Then you were never ready to let it go," she said softly. He stepped forward. Every footfall sank deep into the ash, each one heavier than the last. When he reached the top, he saw remnants of old fires, charred sticks, pieces of bone, feathers turned to dust. He swallowed hard. "How do I start?" "Speak it," Nyla said from behind him. "Let the desert hear your truth. Only then can it decide what stays buried." Daniel took off his hat, his hand trembling slightly. The wind tugged at his coat, lifting the dust around him in small, swirling ghosts. He stared at the ground, voice low. "I killed that boy by accident, but I let it eat me alive on purpose. I thought if I held the guilt long enough, it'd mean I still had a soul left to hurt." He knelt, scooping a handful of ash and letting it slip through his fingers. "I was wrong. It just made me hollow." Nyla approached slowly, her eyes full of something between pity and pride. She knelt beside him, placing a small pouch in his hand. "Throw this into the fire when you're ready," she said. "It's sage and cedar, cleansing smoke, You burn it for what you wish to forgive. Daniel looked at her. And if I don't forgive myself? Then you'll never leave this hill, she said. Not in this life or the next. He stared at the pouch, then at her. The firelight from the small pit she built flickered against her face. Soft, unwavering. Finally he whispered, Then I better try. He tossed the pouch into the flames. The smoke rose fast, curling like the shape of a spirit. It filled his lungs, stung his eyes, and for a moment he swore he saw the boy, standing there at the edge of the hill, not angry, not afraid, just watching. Daniel's knees gave out. He bowed his head, tears mixing with ash. Naylor stood over him silent. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. It's gone. He nodded. Now you can live. He looked up at her, the smoke fading around them. And you? I was sent to guide you, she said. But the fire chose something different. What's that? Her lips trembled into a faint smile. It chose me to stay. He blinked, confused. Stay? She stepped closer, placing her palm over his chest. Your shadow is mine now. You burned the guilt, but in its place you took a bond. Apache call it Tahawe, the heart binding. You didn't buy me, Daniel. You found me. Daniel's eyes softened, the world around them fading into gold as the sun rose. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He reached for her hand, rough, warm, real, and for the first time in years, he felt something that wasn't regret. They descended the hill together as the wind carried the last of the ashes away. Behind them the fire burned steady, not in punishment, but as a promise. That night, when the stars returned and the coyotes began their songs, Daniel sat by the campfire beside Naylor. She rested her head against his shoulder, eyes closed. You paid for me, she murmured, her voice like a prayer. But love can't be bought. Daniel smiled faintly. No, he said, watching the firelight dance in her hair. But sometimes it finds you anyway. The desert wind swept over them, carrying with it the faint scent of cedar and sage, the smell of endings and beginnings.